Good evening. So, I've been working on getting this video up and going tonight for about an hour. Had some Elgato Camlink voodoo happening and settings in my Streamlabs, and so the cricket violin goes. Finally got it figured out, at least enough to get some recordings out there tonight. So tonight I'm going to be looking at a video from Late Night Hasan. I'll put the link down in the description, and it's called "The Collapse of Israel is Inevitable?" And then Hasan is on there reacting, and that's going to be at the beginning of it, and then I'm going to address the extraordinary dissonance of Ezra Klein and how this is an example of a mental health issue. I'm going to be contextually harping on mental health throughout most likely the history of this channel. It's going to be the nucleus in a sense. There's going to be a lot of other activities and demos around sculpture and things like this, but that's going to be a little further into the late spring, early summer. So, and I may have a separate channel for that as well, but I'm going to share the videos on both channels because I'd like to model a holistic approach to folks considering a change in lifestyle. If you are considering that, modeling that, and just putting it out there as a possible venue, and that is to not compartmentalize. Like when people say, I don't want to talk about politics, anything but politics, I feel like there's a mental health issue there too, in the sense that there's denial around politics in the United States. And I think that has something to do with one's own personal position in the world. And of course, each to their own. But I'm just putting it out there for those who are interested in coming full circle, and rather than excluding that part in their lives, even in just common conversation, to include it and see what sort of changes occur if one does so. So I'm going to start the video, and then I'm going to get into a critique of Ezra Klein.
There was this reality people weren't really admitting, that there is one power from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. Yes. That power, that sovereign, which if you travel in that area, and I have, is just visually undeniable, is Israel. American politics has not grappled really at all with the level of day-to-day domination that Israel exerts over Palestinian lives, and the complete absence of any...
This has been my argument as well, and has been the argument of Avi Shleim and numerous other people, okay? It already exists. A one state already exists. It's just currently an apartheid state. So the argument should move towards the abolition of said apartheid state. If you can get to a binational commitment in the process, great. But the first goal should be to recognize that Israel currently operates as a sovereign nation. It is one state.
Horizon at all for that to end. And this was true before October 7th. In early 2023, the political scientists Michael Barnett, Nathan Brown, Mark Lynch, and Shibli Telhami published an edited volume called The One State Reality. Their argument, which they also made in a very controversial foreign affairs piece, was that, quote, Palestine is not a state in waiting, and Israel is not a democratic state incidentally occupying Palestinian territory. All the territory west of the Jordan River has long constituted a single state under Israeli rule, where the land and the people are subject to radically different legal regimes, and Palestinians are permanently treated as a lower caste. What they were saying then is that the hope of a two-state solution in the future had become a way many in America particularly avoided reckoning with the one-state reality of the present. That reality was not accidental. It was not...
I can't believe Ezra Klein is literally a neo-Nazi of the highest order now. The level of anti-Semitism in every orifice of this video is the protocols of the elderly Zion. Am I glorp?
Okay, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit to get to the gist of what I'm going to deal with tonight. So bear with me. So here we go.
The PA. When Netanyahu signed a recent settlement project, a project the United States had opposed for a long time because it would effectively bisect the West Bank, making a Palestinian state physically unimaginable, Netanyahu made clear that that was exactly why he was signing it. He said, "We are going to fulfill our promise. There'll be no Palestinian state. This place belongs to us." In the north, Israel has used the war in Iran as cover to invade Lebanon, displacing more than 1 million people. 1 million, and suggesting that up to 600,000 will not be allowed to return to their home
Barely?
until Israel has established its security zone, whatever that proves to be, and that it is decided that Israelis in the north are safe. To put it bluntly, it is an open question whether any of those 600,000 Lebanese will ever be able to return to their homes, or if they will even have homes to return to. I do not want to underplay what Israel is actually dealing with here. I have immense sympathy for Israel's war against Hezbollah. They are defending...
I don't understand.
So this is it. I'm glad that I found it because I thought it was behind the cursor, like I had already skipped through it. But this is it right there. So then you'll see Hasan tripping out over this as well. When he says he has immense sympathy for Israel's situation. Okay, so keep in mind that Ezra Klein just revealed that, or at least is supporting the reveal that Palestine is not a state in waiting, that it's a one state already. It always has been, at least in the psyche, in the collective ideology of Israel. It has always been one state. They have always looked to exile as many Palestinians they could under the cover of propaganda and even archaeology. And so they have been systematically exiling West Bank Palestinians to Gaza, and Gaza has been the apple of their eye for many decades, even 1948 and onwards. So Gaza was considered by many scholars and human rights activists and organizations as the world's largest open-air prison. Israel bombed and destroyed the airport there a long time ago. Israeli military oceanic boats patrol a demarcation line in the ocean. There's natural gas reserves also off the coast of Gaza that Israel is interested in, of course. And there's a wall. There wasn't always a wall, but there is now, patrolled by robotical machine guns and AI and surveillance cameras, and there are drones constantly patrolling throughout Gaza. Before it was leveled, and so, and Israeli government, if you want to call it a government, apartheid regime, also controlled the amount of nutrition Palestinians have access to daily. Sounds extreme, and it is, and it has been recorded and is online for your investigation. The United Nations can do nothing because the United States vetoes every resolution. The United States is as much culpable in the Gaza genocide and the treatment of the people for generations as Israel, particularly the evangelical branch of America. They sink a lot of money into propaganda and housing and development of stolen Palestinian land. So Ezra Klein says he has immense sympathy for Israel's struggle. And this is a complete dissonant situation where, on one hand, he is sympathetic towards the Palestinians and their plight. On the other hand, he's sympathetic for the Israelis and what they're having to deal with, which is trouble that they themselves have created for themselves. So you can't have both. You can't play both sides in this situation. And it's a moral and ethical choice. And so you either choose to support the occupying apartheid state and you deny the effects of that cause, indicating you have no sympathy for the tens of thousands of children that have been slaughtered in Gaza. You have no sympathy for the thousands of illegally detained Palestinians in prisons, detention centers that are being tortured and starved. You have no sympathies for the starvation of children and adults and elders in Gaza currently. And that's that. You choose that side, or you choose the other side, that you have sympathies for the Palestinians and you have no regard or sympathies for an apartheid regime that has been occupying Palestine since 1948 and on the ground before 1948, but officially Israel became a state in 48, first declared such as by the United States. Many in the UN scoffed at it and laughed out loud because they felt it was a farce, and it was. But Israel and the UK, the G7, they had financial interest in having a militant militia, a little redundant there, but I'm moving along here, a militant deterrent agent, the unsinkable battleship in the Middle East, particularly Britain in the beginning, until they bailed and dropped it in the lap of the United Nations. So Ezra Klein here is a complete moral coward, and he is demonstrating an ego play, playing both sides, or what some people call both-sidism. And this is infuriating because he is a really big, influential figure in the world, let's say, and for, quote, a professional like himself to be carrying around this level of hypocrisy and demonstrating it, modeling it as a normal way of being is just propagating the status quo of poor mental health, because that means there's a disconnect, or he's refusing to make a decision and pretending that he's sympathetic for both sides. And you simply cannot be sympathetic for both sides, because one side is creating the pain, the other side is receiving it. And any pain that is coming from Hamas or private citizens of the Palestinians is pain being delivered to the Israeli occupiers that is in the form of resisting said pain that is being dished out by the IDF and private citizens, the settlers in the West Bank, to innocents. So you have a victimizer and a victim. The victimizer is not the victim. You have to make a decision on this. You have to have moral clarity. You cannot. You can't have both. And so this is what I wanted to address. And I'm going to go a little deeper into the hypocrisy of Ezra Klein as we go through this.
How? This is what, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to me. We're like, Israel is doing unlimited cruelty to millions of primarily children, like millions of Palestinians that are majority kids, right, under the age of 18, is just constantly slaughtering children, constantly engaging in territorial acquisition, doing pogroms in the West Bank, doing it openly, in violation of all rules, but also it's doing it in Lebanon. But I totally sympathize with, blowing up and fighting against Hezbollah. This is a contradiction. You have to resolve it, because it doesn't make sense. You're literally, like, the alternative this is to basically say, that the Nazis are doing all this horrible shit. But I also understand why they had to fight back as the Jewish partisans, right? Like, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising was very violent. Like, it's crazy. You dominate people like this, they're gonna fight back. You kill their parents, their children, their next of kin are gonna be like, okay, well, I gotta take up arms, right?
Defending themselves in a way any state would, but this again is collective punishment. Those million Lebanese, they are not all Hezbollah. Israel's security challenges are very...
So I know there's a little bit of a video delay, but that's how my fledgling YouTube channel is rolling these days for now. I did have it dialed in perfect prior to starting this recording, but it just disappeared. I have no idea how it happened, but it was proof that it could. So here, Ezra Klein flippantly says, "Oh well, they're not all Hezbollah," as if somehow he needed to say that. Which is kind of an eye-rolling situation. You saw Hasan reel back. That's obvious. But Israel, it's part of their ideology that, particularly when you're a cult, anyone who's not in the cult is fair game for projecting shadow material left, right, and center. Displaced vengeance is one of the top 3 shadow pieces for Israel and Israelis in general, because it is not a coincidence that the apartheid regime, their policies, their actions resemble the Third Reich. This is not a coincidence. The nationalism, the supremacy, the procedures, the torture, the experimentation on Palestinians. It has been documented by independent journalists and various, I think there are some cases, or at least reports that have been sent to the United Nations around this, but it has definitely been documented that Israel tests their new military devices in Gaza on citizens. So, like their new AI targeting system, fully automated AI targeting. This was happening in the early days of the Gaza genocide. So the situation is dire, and Israel is in a spiral of sorts. They're starting to step on the toes of Russia, and China is somewhat peripherally involved because of their link with Iran and what's happening in the Hormuz Strait, where China gets about 15–20% of their oil from that area, and it's starting. Some things are starting to brew between China and Russia, Iran, and then Israel's breaking of the ceasefire and continuing to genocide Lebanese people, just as they did in Gaza and are still doing in Gaza. And almost 1 million people displaced. That number is not that far away from the Nakba of 1948. So no right of return for Lebanese is right around the corner. And Israel will level southern Lebanon so that there's nothing to return to. So we have illegal land acquisition, 2 genocides occurring simultaneously now, and a war with Iran. And in a sense, Israel is a proxy participant with the United States, and the United States is proxy with Israel. So whichever propaganda you want to believe, either America is leading and Israel is the proxy, or Israel is leading and America is the proxy. Ultimately, it doesn't matter, but they shift their propaganda back and forth for the benefits of culling and satisfying the citizenry. So I'm really, it's really it saddens me a lot to see this level of high functioning mental degeneration, or not necessarily mental degeneration in such a person as Ezra Klein, but more moral degeneration. So let's say he has real morals and ethics, and he's concealing them because he has supporters from Israel, backers from Israel, and he's playing both sides so that he can keep his job. And yet, to me, this is too high of a price to pay for creating what he's creating, and that is manufacturing consent for a genocide and manufacturing a kind of complacency and apathy for looking at Israel through the lens of an apartheid state, uncompromisingly looking at Israel as nothing other than an apartheid state that needs to be dismantled like South Africa's apartheid state was. So, and it will happen. There's no way that Israel is going to go back to what it was before October 7th. It's just not going to happen. And Ezra Klein is simply slowing the process, confusing the process, creating ambiguity for people, hand-waving away what has been staring in grown-up adults, their faces for over 3 years now. And he's weaseling around, which I find to be incredibly disingenuous and hurtful to humanity at large, criminally hurtful. He is a dangerous individual. And I'm just putting it out there that I see you, Ezra Klein, and I hope that you can figure yourself out one dark night in the mirror. So here we go. I think I'm almost done through this video. I think I got to the gist of what I wanted to address, but I want to go a little further just in case.
Its horror, its fear, its trauma after October 7th was very real. Its determination to make sure that never happened again is what any state and any people would do. Its right to reprisal against Hamas and Hezbollah were undeniable. I am not someone who wants to see the state of Israel.
Okay, so I'm glad I'm going forwards, because this reprisal BS that Ezra Klein is putting out there and saying that he understands it, Hezbollah and Hamas are resistant military entities. They are resisting Israel's apartheid occupation, and they have a legacy of being tortured, assassinated, kidnapped, among other horrendous events. Some of the men serving are orphans because their parents were assassinated or genocided. Sisters or brothers assassinated or genocided. So this reprisal, there is no reprisal rights on Israel's side. I'll just say it. Because Israel is not innocent. It never has been. It has been creating blood debt since its inception and prior in the Balfour Papers, where it is clearly alluded to that Palestinians will need to be moved off their lands. And in moving off people that have been there for centuries, you are going to have bloodshed. That is obvious. Any human being that has invested blood, sweat, and tears into a piece of property, into building the home themselves, into their neighborhoods and friends and relatives, there is going to be mortal resistance, as it would be with any human being. No one is going to allow, no one who can resist is not going to just lay down and let another human being take what is theirs and abuse their children, abuse their spouse, kill their livestock, burn down their olive groves. There is going to be, it's just like when two tigers decide to fight. It's a fight to the death. They don't. There's no tapping out with lions and tigers. It's you or me, and there will not be another day for the second participant in that fight. And so Ezra Klein here is he's simply propagandizing and confusing the facts. And the facts are that in a moral and just world, October 7th, there would have been cover and news reports around why that is considered blowback, cause and effect, the effect of a cause, and there would be a sharing of information around the thousands and thousands and thousands of innocents that Israel has murdered and assassinated and exiled with no right of return and put into detention centers to languish and be tortured. There would be an explanation of why that effect occurred, a thorough dissection and analysis of the cause. But that's not the case in this world. So the reprisal part is complete and utter fiction. Ultimately, it hasn't come out yet. It's come out a little bit, but not on mainstream media, probably never will. But Israel, on the day, prior to October 7th, they slacked off on security around where the wall was breached. And those Hamas resistance fighters who went through the wall, they were also followed by private citizens who were not part of Hamas. And I'm not going to go into October 7th too much because there's a lot to talk about, but ultimately there's more forensic journalism around it, that the death count is way lower than Israel claims, and not that really, I'm not saying that makes it better or worse. I'm just saying that the IDF was heavily involved in Israelis getting mowed down as well, and via helicopter gunships and tanks. So Hamas and the private citizenry that was breaching the gate, breaching the fence, they knew they weren't coming back. This was a one-way trip. At least that was the initial idea, and they were surprised to find the security and the readiness so lax. So Israel, October 7th was inevitable. It would have been like the ghetto uprisings in Germany. It's inevitable. And so this was exactly what Israel had been pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing to occur, to give them an excuse to level Gaza and take it. So I'm just putting it out there that there's more than one way to create a false flag. You can detonate a bomb and then blame it on someone else, or you can create a situation that you know what the outcome is going to be, and then point the finger as if it's just an act of nature, like some sort of, like as if it wasn't instigated. Israel has been instigating October 7th for decades. So this reprisal stuff is completely worthless trash, basically. And it's sad. It's sad to see and hear.
To exist, but what Israel is choosing here, a one-state reality that already is and will continue to be understood the world over as apartheid. It endangers that state too. The cost of Israel cannot morally be the permanent subjugation of millions of Palestinians. In February, Gallup found for the first time more Americans sympathize with the Palestinians than the Israelis. Among Democrats, among young Americans, it is not even close.
Okay, so I think that's a good place to end with Hasan taking off. I think I'll take off too. So I want to go a little deeper before I end the video here. So Ezra Klein, I want to share with you a few things. So here we have New York Times columnist. So I'm going to address that first. New York Times. Here we go. Another criminal organization in the context of Gaza and the Palestinian plight of being occupied by an apartheid regime. The New York Times has faced intense, sustained criticism and accusations of bias regarding its coverage of the Israel-Hamas war in Gaza, with critics alleging the paper has acted as a mouthpiece for misinformation and manufactured consent for war. So there is no alleging, by the way. This is just someone covering their ass. It has been proven that the New Yorker does not do their due diligence in cross-examining and investigating the sources of some of these extreme reports that came out, that they published, that were then later proven completely false. So it keeps going. It says accusations, but if you want to do the research yourself, you can find, especially around Democracy Now! And Electronic Intifada. The Electronic Intifada made it one of their top goals to roast the New York Times and go deep into proving and showing others that have proven the New York Times reporting completely false. 100% propaganda, and the New York Times not going back and pulling those stories and doing an op-ed in a sense, apologizing and owning what their criminal actions were and are. By not owning it, it stays a crime. So, manufacturing consent and bias, over 150 contributors pledged to boycott the paper, citing biased coverage and accusing it of laundering Israeli and U.S. lies, as well as failing to properly report on Israeli war crimes. Misleading reporting on starvation. In July 2025, the Times was heavily criticized for amending a story about a starving Palestinian child after Israeli pressure, adding that he had a pre-existing condition. Critics argued this downplayed the broader famine in Gaza. Ruthless sociopathy coming from the editors and participants of the New York Times. It's just unbelievable, absolutely, well, heart-wrenching actually. That's probably a better word for me. Controversy over screams without words. Now, this is not controversy. This just is simply fact versus fiction. The paper has been urged to retract Screams Without Words on December 2023, investigative story regarding sexual violence on October 7th, which critics and some family members of those profiled have challenged as lacking evidence. It does lack evidence, and it has been proven to be a completely fabricated and false documentary. Passive language and sourcing. Critics have pointed out that the Times often uses passive language in headlines when Palestinians are killed, while relying on and sometimes failing to verify information from Israeli military sources. So what they mean here in passive language is they'll say things like, an Israeli was kidnapped from their tank. And then they'll say a Palestinian has disappeared or was removed, or like they use, and by the way, you can't kidnap a prisoner of war. That's a prisoner of war. And the Times knows that semantics and words have power and play around with people's perception. And so kidnapped is more dramatic, as if there's a victim. When you're a prisoner of war, you are a hired homicide machine that has been captured by someone who you have not yet been able to homicide. And so, in a sense, there is no victim here. You are now being detained so that you don't go killing anymore. So it's not as if you're innocent, as if Hamas went into a college dormitory and kidnapped a bunch of innocent students. So it's another form of enabling and downplaying that mainstream media has been doing throughout the entire conflict, using the passive language versus dramatic language that makes Israel look like the victim when they're the victimizer. So it's like you never get to the cause when you hyperinflate the effects, and then you give credence to the victimizer as if those effects are somehow causes unto themselves. They're not. That's blowback from what you're doing as the victimizer. So the victimizer cannot be a victim and a victimizer. You can't say, you can't complain that you have a broken window because you threw a rock into it. See how that works? So further into this, internal rifts, basically the Times has faced internal disputes with reports of journalists disagreeing with coverage. The Newsroom Union Times Guild filed a grievance regarding the interrogation of journalists of Middle Eastern descent in an investigation over leaked newsroom dissent. So basically racism. Admitted errors. The Times admitted 72 errors in its war coverage, 48 of which were about Israel. So, but ultimately, when it comes to stuff like this, the apology that comes 2, 3, 4 weeks later, sometimes 4 years later, in the back of the paper, not on the front page, the damage has already been done. You've already seeded a plastic weed that grows in the psyche and the minds and the hearts of the citizenry. And that suspicion, that benefit of the doubt, has already been planted. And there should be a neutral party to keep things like that from happening, like a czar editor who works for the public at large and has no bias and just simply is there to oversee and make sure that these kinds of things don't happen. But that won't happen anytime soon because newspapers and media are bought by the U.S. State Department and their enablers and the people that they support, their donors, the military-industrial complex, the capitalists, the other G7 countries that have an invested interest in keeping Israel as much out of the mud as possible. But when you're manufacturing mud, it's hard to keep yourself out of it. So last but not least, Ezra Klein himself. Again, he's a journalist, columnist for the New York Times. So I find this interesting. He advocates for supply-side progressivism and the abundance movement, focusing on pro-growth, deregulatory policies to tackle issues like housing scarcity. Well, how's the housing scarcity in Gaza right now, with over 100,000 homes destroyed, leveled, all the universities destroyed and leveled, all the hospitals destroyed, desalination plants, public works, historical monuments, you name it, it's 3 feet tall at this point. And the housing number could be higher. I'm pulling that out of my memory because through the years I've been looking through, there's a monitoring agency that does charts about how many have been accounted for, the dead and structures and things like this. And I think it's called Euromed, but I'm not exactly sure. I'd have to get on my computer and look that up. I may put the link in the description. So this is the contradiction and the hypocrisy. He supports Israel, and Israel is basically destroying everything that he's about, and he's okay with that. Klein promotes politics of abundance. Never mind the starvation campaign going on Gaza since day one. October 7th, a siege was placed on Gaza that has not ended. Advocating for government actions that boost construction and reduce environmental safety regulations that restrict infrastructure development. Boost construction while Gaza is being carpet bombed indiscriminately. He is a strong advocate for institutional reforms such as abolishing the Senate filibuster. Yeah, imagine that. I wonder what he thinks about Israel's filibuster and being an apartheid state, occupying and suppressing and depressing an entire ethnic class of people. His work often addresses political polarization, animal welfare, and urging Democrats to create more affordable, high-growth urban environments. So everything this guy is about, Israel is not about, insofar as taking all that away and never giving it to the Palestinians. So the apartheid regime in Israel is a complete nemesis to Ezra Klein. Either he's in denial, or he's just outright lying, or he's delusional and actually is carrying around this dissonance in his mind, and he's borderline schizophrenic in some ways. Like he'll switch back and forth and somehow stays together in between those two extremes of like almost like a bipolar situation. So I just wanted to put that out there tonight. I wanted to roast Ezra Klein. It just it really, really gets me reeling when I just see that people who are supposedly deep in politics and deep in the muck, they know things that I don't even know. They have a level of relativity. I'm gonna switch out of the screen for you guys. I forgot to do that. Pardon. So they have a level of relativity that I don't have, and they're doing such a disservice to the public and to the Palestinians and to the world, because their words get recorded, and it feeds into, again, the apathy and the doubt. And what we need is no doubt. We need grown up adults with sound moral foundations and ethical foundations that have no biases, that simply are servants to the public and to humanity, and they can call this stuff out, and that there could be repercussions. I feel like people like Ezra Klein should be treated as criminals, and there should be some sort of reparation or fine implied, and be made an example. That's what you have to do with folks, because the human being is a visceral creature, and most people don't learn until they feel it. They don't learn by being told, oh, you did something wrong, that wasn't right. But they do feel it if you sue them for $13 million, like Fox was sued. There's like you have to bring in a third party that just simply delivers a consequence, an objective consequence, a material consequence. Otherwise, the psyche doesn't learn. It's learned to deflect and sidestep other human beings and other psyches its whole life, and it has coping mechanisms out the wazoo for all that stuff. But it doesn't have coping mechanisms for mortgaging its house so that it can pay a lawsuit, and now lives in an apartment and works at Walmart as the assistant to the assistant manager. Not that there's anything wrong with Walmart. I'm just saying that going from being a journalist in the New Yorker to Walmart might teach Ezra something about the general public and the bare necessities. So, and what really makes humans tick. Honesty and integrity, dignity. So not a good night between me and Ezra. So I'll end it there. I think that's plenty. Almost an hour in, and just really happy to get my camera up and going for you guys. So all the best. Thank you for supporting the channel. Please like and subscribe, share. Feel free to leave a comment. Yeah. Good night.